Okay, we have wonderful guests here today, so we want to take full advantage of our time, but I want to get started right on time if we can. You know, I will be leaving on vacation. I leave in the morning. The flight's at 7 something. I'll be gone through Monday. But I'm just going to be in Detroit, so I mean, I'll have my phone. They have cell service and text service.
I hope you're packing.
Detroit is part of this theme that I'm in. I mean, you've got to remember, we're a long time into this, and I get slammed all the time for being anti-preservationist. I don't know why that is. We talked about this last week in the Historic District Update. I've restored 30 houses myself. I live in a historic home I restored. But our industry is constantly tearing down houses, and they see the Boulevard Realty sign, and Bill Baldwin, the broker guy, is tearing down one more house in Houston, Texas to make way for another condominium project or a townhouse. And we've got to do a better job of educating the consumer about that, and there's positive things for redevelopment. There's many reasons to save houses, there's many reasons to save buildings, there's some reason to build new at the same time. So part of my vacation is going to Detroit to see about urban blight and urban renewal. I've been doing this for a number of years. We had a fantastic time in Pittsburgh, which was an amazing Renaissance city here that's redefined itself after the rust, boom, bust, or whatever. And so Detroit is the same thing. The movie that we're going to focus on July 15th is called Detroitpia, which we're hosting at 14 Pew, and the invitations will go out to you later today and on Facebook and Twitter. It's part of the same little resurgence here. So this is a little 4-minute video about why I'm going to Detroit, and it's also giving us a sense of why we buy old AT&T buildings and convert them to projects, and the value and the intrinsic value of buildings matter, but communities matter, and neighborhoods matter, which is the theme of what all we're doing over here. So, Aaron, let's give it a whirl.
Sorry. Aaron.
Sorry. There went Detroit. Revitalized.
Detroit is full of beautiful buildings, and they all matter, and they all have character, and they all have stories. To look at every vacant building as being blighted and needing to come down is a mistake. Vacant buildings are opportunities.
The argument about blight is that if you have one house on your block that's vacant, that can have a domino effect.
It's difficult to look past boarded up windows or missing windows, but it's important to shift the perspective of what a building can mean.
We see people from all walks of life and from all experience levels who are rehabbing homes in Detroit or buildings in Detroit. I see people who are just like me, who have no experience, who say, I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna see what I can do.
They're putting the sweat equity in because the place matters.
I was moving to Detroit from California. I had always been interested in the awesome do-it-yourself attitude of everybody living in Detroit, and I just got back from Afghanistan, so I had a little bit of money in my pocket. Luckily, there's like 3 other crazy young guys who are interested in kind of restoring a house. We've been doing a lot of different manual labor activities, mostly demolition. I mean, a lot of tearing out old plaster walls. Our roof last weekend, and over the course of 2 weeks, worked with our contractor to actually rebuild the roof ourselves with him, which was the most exciting thing I've ever done. I never thought I'd be so happy to sit on a roof for 6 hours in 25-degree weather. Now it actually is starting to look like a house. That's something that I did, and that'll be there for hopefully 100 years.
People in the city are interested in reinvesting in those older buildings because there's a connection there to our past, to our heritage.
One of my favorite things about Detroit is that we have all these unique older buildings that really give it a unique character. You get to see the path of U.S. history coming through, the architectural changes that happen over time.
Oftentimes people have some shared history or memory of a building. Like this building, for example, it's really been a mutual investment with the current owner of the building.
I always envisioned myself as being one that would help revitalize the neighborhood.
Practice Space is a number of things all at once. We have architects, developers, designers. We really seek to be a resource for entrepreneurs who are looking to inject old spaces with new ideas. It would have costed us a lot of money to try to beat back the garage in this garage, put a drywall everywhere. We had to be living the story that we're trying to help people create for themselves. I think it allows us to relate to other people who are doing the same work.
I know what it's like to start from scratch with a building or with a project, and as far as what they're doing in here, I think it gives hope.
I think one of the cool things about rehab is the fact that it really helps bring communities back. It feels like a time machine. You're like driving down the road exactly like it was in 1914.
I could take you and show you buildings that have been refurbished, and they're much nicer than seeing a vacant field. Wood flooring they have, crown molding, all the wonderful things. And we're tearing it down. I don't see that as progress.
Preservation is a very immediate and tangible and hands-on way to play a part in Detroit's history.
And I think that as people start coming back to the city, they're going to realize that this is a really, really unique and cool place to live.
Communities are made up of people and parks and all kinds of pieces that go together. Buildings are a part of that. Every building can matter.
The thing about Detroit, I mean, it's gone from 1.8 million people down to 700,000 people. They've certainly had a decline in population, and they have a crime problem. What they must first do is create a sense of pride in the city. I mean, if you don't have pride, you'll never be able to recover. There's been a conscientious effort since the recession, since the resurgence of General Motors. I mean, it required a bailout. It was billions and billions of dollars of our tax dollars that went over there to save General Motors and the automotive industry, because it was a reflection of the need of the country to stop the bleeding and start back forward, reinvent yourself. General Motors gets the opportunity to reinvent itself. Detroit gets the same opportunity. And I'm going to go see Blight. 38% of all of these structures are vacant. They are 5 and 6 years behind on their property taxes. What they're talking about, yes, if you're in a block, in the 1600 block of Harvard, and 5 of them are vacant and 7 of them are delinquent with their taxes, there's little incentive for you to go start paying your taxes when people aren't paying their fair share. They're literally, you must envision a large city all the way to the Beltway, and they're tearing out and consolidating the city back to what would be almost like the 610 loop. That's the only hope they have of consolidating the people back into the inner city, taking the most amazing buildings, converting them to loft, mixed use, and retail, get in some young gay guys and some geek, nerd, tech sort of people and artists, and reinvent themselves as a city and get back this pride. So I'm going to see Blight, and I'm going to go see Renewal, and I'm going to share it with you later.
Have those houses been foreclosed on?
I mean, the city, you can have hundreds of thousands of these structures for $1. If you just Google, I bought a house in Detroit for $500, there's 2.5 million hits on the YouTube video. They'll give you the house
What about the back taxes?
for $1. They'll forgive the taxes, but you have to go spend $80,000 or $90,000 to restore the house that's worth $42,000 after you're finished spending $100. It's only going to work if everyone does it. If you take the whole block and everyone restores it and everyone's value increases, and you deal with crime, and the parks in the whole city look like ghost towns over there.
Yeah.
You got to create a sense of pride in the neighborhood. Get together with the corporation and restore the park. Tie in the young people so they want to send their kids to schools. Everyone take a little more pride in your house and eat in your local restaurant, and it will work. People would not move to the Heights 15 years ago. It was way too scary for them.
Yeah.
There's plenty of opportunities in Houston, Texas, the same. Just go over there to LBJ Hospital right up there. It's the same distance downtown to that location as it is right here at 1545 Heights Boulevard. And I can sell you a 20,000 square foot lot with a 1,400 square foot bungalow on it for $15,000. except I'm scared to park my car there myself. And it won't work if one person goes and doesn't. I've got to convince Frank Lou to go buy 100 acres. I got to convince Andy to buy the adjacent 50 acres. And I got to get somebody else, Harold Clark's grandson, to go there and buy the adjacent 50 acres. And if I can convince enough people to go spend $20,000 on a lot that I think someday it's going to be worth $150,000, and we get enough people to do it, it will work on the east side, it will work on the near north side, it will work in that area of Denver Harbor. You can't believe how depressed those areas are compared to these areas 1.5 miles to the west of them. But there's great opportunity in the city. I think as these other areas become more expensive, we'll see transformation of those areas too. So that leads us into Bell Heights, and indirectly. Donna, you start and give us the background and introduce Andy. And
hand out those brochures while we're starting.
Yeah. We're going to give everybody a brochure, and in that brochure is going to be all the information about Bell Heights. There are renderings of the building, there are interior renderings of the lofts, there's one of a cottage, site plan, all floor plans are in there, and it'll give you a good idea of what we're building there. Bell Heights is a gated enclave of 44 homes. There are 24 lofts there. They range in size from about 1,500 square feet to just over 3,500 square feet. And there are 20 cottages surrounding it. Those cottages are single-family homes. They range in size from just over 2,200 square feet to over 3,000 square feet. There's 2 plans that are elevator capable. Many of them have private courtyards that are fenced in. The whole community is gated. It will be on common park areas with fountains and lots of green spaces. There is a 10,000 square foot entertainment area that's being built on the rooftop that is just amazing. It's got a great view downtown. There'll be an outdoor kitchen. There'll be gardens up there, fire pits, reflecting pool, hot tub, putting green, nice place to entertain your family or guests.
Beautiful view of the Heights in downtown.
Exactly.
So let me jump in. So
Sorry, Bill,
as
Andy
typically,
Soon.
yeah, Andy Soon with Rowan Wright. I'm one of the 2 partners. My middle name is Wright. For those that always ask that question, that's where the name came from. 2 founding partners' middle names. It's really interesting. Bill's usually, right on. It's kind of funny as I watched that video how right on it is with the story of how we acquired this property. So AT&T was the most recent tenant, and in fact, Southwestern Bell commissioned the building to be designed and built in the 50s, and the building was actually built by W.S. Bellows, which, if you know Houston and been around a long time, is sort of the preeminent historical contractor of large hospitals, office buildings, stadiums, and so forth. They're still one of the preeminent ones. So what was interesting about when this property came on the market a couple of years ago was that obviously the Heights at that point had already begun to just kind of go crazy, so it had a tremendous amount of interest. But like the video says, everybody that came and looked at this building came to look at the property, looked at the building as an expense, as a problem. And when they did their pro formas on how to develop this property, instead of taking the building and looking at it as an opportunity, as they talked about, they did their pro forma looking at how much was it going to cost to get rid of this building so that we can develop this property. And that led to the opportunity for Rowan Wright to acquire the property because we looked at it differently. We looked at it as, wow, this is a really interesting building. We studied the structure and had the engineers come in, and it's as bulky and awesome a structure as you can imagine. And then the key thing that really made the whole thing work for us, obviously the location, you all know, we're on the corner of Ashland and 18th, so we're directly behind Torchy's. And if you've ever read the history of the Heights, which I'm sure Bill has many times, the original developers of the Heights, there was a book written about them and where they were quoted, and they looked at the corner of Ashland and 19th as the epicenter of the downtown town center of the Heights. Okay, they considered that to be the center of the Heights. We're a block off of that, so from a location standpoint, it made perfect sense. But what really pushed it over the edge for us was when we looked at the property and we looked at the building, we realized that the building has a basement that's half underground and half above ground. As you kind of look, the building has a wainscot around it, a water table around it that sticks up probably 5 feet above ground before you really get to the first floor. That basement that's half sunk was really for them just storage and equipment and things like that. But it has a, I forget, 12 or 13 foot plate in the basement alone, height in the basement alone. The opportunity that created was for us, and they had a loading dock at that level. It created an opportunity for us to put 50-car garage in the basement. By putting a 50-car garage in the basement, we could pull away the 2 huge parking lots that are there today. The 50 cars allows us to have 2 dedicated reserve spaces for every one of the 24 lofts that we're building in the adaptive reuse of this building. And then what that allows us to do, if you've ever been to a row and ride gated community, and there are a number of them, we're known for creating a sense of place and creating a lot of green space and interior parks that all residents get to use. You know, one of the larger, better known companies in town is In Town Homes and Frank Liu and Lovett Homes. He takes a different approach. By the way, we're almost always, as we are here directly across the street, you know, we're always buying and looking at the same dirt, and we're often developing properties directly next door to each other. His approach is a little different. He's max density that you basically can get. You have a driveway between you and your next building. There aren't parks associated with those developments. Here, on the other hand, we've created that as we do in all of our places. So these 2 parking lots, what we've done is we've created 10 home developments on each of the parking lots that each share a park. Okay, and you'll see that in the site plan. If you pull up this, thank you. Pull this up. This is probably a great tool to really kind of orient you and your clients on what Bell Heights is really all about. And it's labeled, and you can see on there all the different amenities that we're adding in. But the 20 cottages, as we're calling them, are 3 stories. They're completely detached, so they're not a townhome. They're a single-family detached home. They enter into a private gated area that enjoys a park. Each one of them has their own park area. And I say their own, and this is where things get really interesting about this development. We've got basically 2 different types of buyers. We've got the single-family cottage buyers, and we've got the single-family loft condominium buyers, right? 24 loft condominiums and 20. They're all 44 equally sharing in all of the amenities of Bell Heights. So if you look in the corner of the building, sorry, I keep stealing this from you. If you look at the corner of the building, there's this small white square with a little gray ramp and staircase. That small white square is a stair and elevator tower that goes all the way up to the rooftop. Okay? So if you're one of the 20 owners of one of these cottages, you can walk right up to that stair, you'll have a code, and you can go in an elevator with your cooler all the way up to the rooftop terrace. Okay? You have full access as a cottage owner to the rooftop terrace, and as a loft owner, you have full access to the 2 parks to go walk your dog, to go hang out, sit in the park, get your mail, talk to your neighbors, that sort of thing. So they're cross-sharing all of the amenities of this development. So if you think about it, if you bought one of these cottages, which by the way we start at $6.99, you buy one of these cottages at $6.99 and you want to have people over, you can load up the cooler and go up and cook steaks at the outdoor kitchen, sit next to the reflecting pool, sit in the hot tub, all watching downtown at sunset. That's an amenity you get a use of with your homeowners fees. That's pretty hard to do at $6.99 and have a single family home, okay? Another thing that you have in your typical lofts, a lot of times you don't have a place to walk the dog. You don't have a place to get out. Well, here you do because you've got the 2 parks on the ground. So, again, back to the video, our concept was fabulous building, great structure. The opportunity is there to preserve the building and do what they call an adaptive reuse. And so we've taken a commercial building that was Southwestern Bell and then AT&T and turned it into a residential building. We're going to preserve and accent some of the history of that building. It was the telephone museum for many years. It's a neat building. Admittedly, it's not a pretty building right now, okay? But if you take a look at the renderings in there, we're going to make it a very pretty building. And one of the things that we're doing at great expense is adding 3-story wraparound porches all the way around this building so that every single unit has an outdoor balcony area that's private to their unit. They're not shared, so when you go out on this, it's yours alone. Some of them, like the corner units, have a wraparound that goes on both sides, and some of the units actually have just 2 as it works out in the building Obviously, we stacked them to have a, the proportion of the building. Some of them actually have more than one balcony. It's a rendering of one of the corner units. This is the one that looks right out at the corner of 18th and Ashland. You can see the Jonathan Favre development that was done across the street. And then this is the parking lot of Torchy's directly across the street. I can't tell you because you just got to see it, but the views on this rooftop are spectacular. Okay, when you get up, not only is it very green, you can see from the rendering all the things that are up there. And I'm not just talking artificial like the one over there on Studewood. This is hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of green roof, landscape, living improvements. Plus, we've got the outdoor kitchen, the spa, we've got the fountain, we've got the fire pit lounge area, and we've got a putting green, all on this rooftop. So there's a lot of amenities to enjoy anytime you're entertaining. But the views are spectacular from that level. There's nothing that remotely comes close to blocking your view at this point of the downtown skyline, and frankly, it's really all the way around. So it's a fabulous views up there. Typical loft, concept. Row and Wright is known as a luxury brand. We are finishing these things out at a higher level than Studewood, for example, if any of y'all have been through that project. But it's still loft, polished concrete floors, polished concrete columns and ceilings, and loft finishes. Okay, the cottages, you'll see a rendering of the cottages are more our typical custom home interiors. Okay, with a lot more millwork and trim and hardwood floors and things like that. If you've ever been in a Row and Wright home, very typical Row and Wright home. One of the exciting things is we just opened on Saturday morning Donna's new sales office on 18th across the street from the Torchy's and the Hits Theater there. So you have an office on site with a full design center inside there. In other words, we had the architectural firm that designed this adaptive reuse, Mirador, designed 6 different interior packages, and they're all showcased there. So the clients can come in and pick from 6 different packages, either for the lofts or the cottages, that are pre-done with white Carrara marbles and beautiful cabinets, beautiful stone flooring, high-end Hansgrohe plumbing fixtures, Viking appliances. The things that you would expect in a Row and Wright home are also the case here. So that tells you a little bit about what we're doing. We're just getting started. We have not actually released the pricing on the lofts yet, but we have released the first 4 cottages. Probably just worth mentioning because the question will come up. AT&T bought a parcel of 6 lots down the street on 18th, a little closer to Shepherd, so a little west of them at some point. I don't even know when in that 50 years they did, but at some point they did. We're already building the houses on those lots. They're not a part of Bell Heights. They don't share those amenities, but they're great location, high-end finish, custom homes. We've already sold 2 of them.
Start at $869.
Start at $869 and go to
$949.
There you go. And so we've already sold 2 of those, 3 that are started, and the other 3 are in permitting right now, so all 6 of those are going up. But those are sort of a separate thing, but Donna will sell those from the same trailer, but they're not enjoying the amenities of this. They are enjoying the amenities of being a block from shade and everything else, right? So questions, thoughts? Yes, Jay?
Say the calendar again, Andy.
Calendar. We're officially started Saturday morning, so we're pre-selling. The White Linen Night on August 2nd is really our grand opening launch. We're still working on exactly what we're going to be doing there at the building, but it's looking like it's going to be sort of the epicenter of the party that night at the building. We're going to have it open for people to walk through. We're going to have the sales trailer open. So that's really where our hard launch is, although Donna's eagerly trying to convince me and to get out some pricing on the first release of the lofts, which I'm working hard on trying to make happen.
It's easier to sell if we know what they cost.
Yeah.
Not impossible. We've
What's
had
that
many
HOA
reservations.
I'm sorry, what?
What kind of flavor are those going to be?
They're probably going to be right somewhere in the 32 to 35 cents a square foot for the lofts, and then we'll have a fixed number for the cottages. Our typical development is going to range anywhere from $395 to $500 a month for a single-family home. I think I don't know for sure yet, but it's somewhere in that range. And then the 32 to 35 cents a square foot is very common. Frankly, I've been amazed. We went and looked at several loft buildings that, I hope it's not one of y'all's listening, but one of that horrible building over on Morrison Avenue that is being done. They're even at 35 cents. I don't know what amenities you get for that 35 cents, but it's not much. That you're listening?
No.
But I think it's very reasonable when you consider the amenities that we have, if that's where it falls out. But to answer your question, that's arranged. They're not set yet. Other questions? So back to calendar. Let me finish calendar and then I'll come back. So we will pre-sell a certain portion of the loft before we commence on the reuse. We've already completed the demolition so that you can go through the building. The last thing, and they're already started on, is they're sandblasting all of the interior concrete, the ceilings and the columns, to get some of the paint and glue residue off. That's the last detail that we're working on right now. Otherwise, the building is completely clear and ready for reconstruction, okay? But that reconstruction date of commencement will be based on pre-sale. Somewhere around 40% of the building pre-sold, and then that will commence. We're actually already in our third round, our third pass to the city for permitting. So the plans are completely done. We're almost permitted, but we won't physically break ground until we reach a plateau of something around 35 or 40% pre-sales on the building. Now, on the cottages, we're already underway. If you drove over there in the last couple of days, I just drove there on my way here. We're already putting the underground infrastructure in place right now. They're there digging all the sewers, water lines, storm sewer is all going in place right now. And then as soon as that's done, the paving will go in for the streets. And then as soon as that's done, we'll start construction on the first 4 houses, the first 4 cottage houses. Okay, so that's imminent. That's happening right now. And those are priced and available for sale. I would expect the building to take 15 to 18 months to complete once we commence. Okay, we will complete floor by floor though. So it's possible that somebody who buys on the 3rd floor would have a different entry date than somebody who buys on the 1st floor. And actually your next question, which I haven't finalized yet, is well, which one's going to come first? I don't know the answer to that. Now your turn, sorry.
So if you want to throw a party and use the outdoor kitchen, do you make a reservation or you show up and hope it's available?
No, you make reservations. Well, the outdoor kitchen's huge. The outdoor kitchen's as big as this room. You wouldn't need to even reserve it if you're just going to have another couple or 3 couples to come over. Again, the rooftop terrace space that we're actually using, if you see it on there, is 10,000 square feet. Think about that. It's a huge space. And there's tons of seating, tons of decking. It's a big space. But if you wanted to have a reception, let's say, or a baby shower or something like that up there, then you could reserve that space through the HOA. They would probably charge a cleaning fee and all that. But it's your condo association, so there's not like some rental fee. Okay?
We are taking reservations on the lofts, of which for $10,000 you can have first right of refusal sort of approach.
Correct.
Let's talk about that. So the moment I finally come out with pricing, okay,
Soon,
we're hoping, we've already reserved a couple of the units in there. That person that goes ahead and puts up $10,000 now and signs a reservation for a specific unit will get the first opportunity to buy that unit before we go with our final pricing. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to give Donna pricing on all the reserved units, okay, only, and then when she goes back to those people, if they then write a contract, they get that price. When we go to market for the full building, it'll be at a higher price. So we'll add a couple of percentage points to those prices and then the market. So those people that reserve now will get an opportunity to pick the unit they want and to get it at a pre-release
There are
price.
certainly preferential units in the building. If they're looking for a lot of light, corner units are nice. There's one unit that's a 2-story loft, which is
Very
really
cool.
fantastic. It has an enormous patio space.
Yeah, that 2-story unit is probably one of, you always laugh because you think you know which ones are going to be the most popular, but I'll tell you, when I look at the plans, that unit is really, really neat. It's got a circular stair to get up to the bedroom level, and then it's got a very open studio feel with a lot of light on the first level. Great views. It's a neat unit. All the other ones, though, are, of course, 1-story walls.
Average ceiling height?
About 12 feet.
There are 2 units, though, that have 15-foot ceilings.
That's true. In demolition, we discovered a corner of the first floor. We think that when the building was first built, they had a loading dock in that location. It's not where the loading dock is today. That is dropped about 2 feet. That whole corner of the first floor building, the slab is dropped about 2 feet. We got into demolition, we discovered that they had built up to even that floor at some point later. So those units, I think there's
There's two.
two that are affected by that,
106,
that actually have an extra couple of feet. So you have a couple of height changes in the flooring on that level, and it
Really
gets you
neat.
some high ceilings in the living dining areas. It's pretty neat.
It's a cool building.
It's a very cool building. We didn't talk about style, and it's a little bit in this rendering, although that rendering I love, but the building was built as an Art Deco building, and if you've ever had a chance to really stop on Ashland and kind of look at it, which you may never have, you can sort of see some of the bones of that Art Deco feel, and right there at the entry, we are not only preserving that entry element, but we're actually dressing it up in an Art Deco style with a metal awning that goes over the front door and has the 1714. The numbers are standing on the end of that awning, and then there's cables that come back to the building to hold it up. So we're dressing up the Art Deco feel of this building at the entry level, inside the foyer of the building as well, and playing off the history of what the original style of the building was. The rest of the building, you can see we're adding all those balconies all the way around. The brick will be a combination of painted, where you see that color, and this color really comes out a little more yellow than it really will be. Actually, even worse than that. It's really just sort of a linen color building with the new brick that goes in on the porches and balconies that's exposed is going to be an antique red brick that really fits the history of the community more than anything. So that's the style of it. Other thoughts, questions? Peppermint. Great time.
Exciting.
The smallest units there in the building, I mean, are there
1,400.
1,400 and around 350 a foot, 325, 350 a foot?
That's correct. That's where we plan to be.
Probably get in for under 500,000 for that unit?
So I think in the fives, right? Right at
Yeah,
five. So, I
right
mean,
at 500.
seriously, for those, and we have several of those 1,400 units.
We do, there's a
Like
couple
four?
of them. I think there's three.
Three. So again, the amenities and the location, if you could buy a unit in this building in the 500s, goodness gracious.
How much is the two-story with a huge planter outside?
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, very
That
cool.
one's
That's an
fantastic.
extremely
That's
cool.
the only one.
It's
like
the only
that.
one. I haven't priced any of them yet, but you know, thinking that same
That
price per
terrace
square
is
foot.
The
huge.
terrace is amazing.
Yeah.
And if you're a social person, you'll notice on the site plan, that terrace sits right next to that tower I was telling you about, that everybody goes up to the roof. So as they come up to get in there, your terrace is sitting now. We have a landscape around that terrace that's private, but it's sort of a
So you could be
center of the universe kind of unit.
You
Right?
could be the greeter, I guess.
You're the greeter,
You
yes.
could be the mayor.
You can be the mayor of Bell Heights if you live there. That's right. That's right. Other thoughts? Any questions about Rowan Wright?
Yeah, take 2 minutes to tell us about your
Sure.
other project.
Started in 1999. We've always had a history of doing two things: building custom homes and developing gated communities. Developing the gated communities was something that was really the niche that I wanted to fill when we started the company. I worked for other builders for about 7 years, but I'm a native Houstonian, grew up in town, and was looking at, frankly, I beat on Frank Lou all the time, looking at everything Frank Lou was doing and just saying, blah. It just is so blah, and Houston deserves better. And that's really why we started the company, was to create these gated communities that had architecture that we could be proud of, that would last the test of time in Houston. So we've built a lot of custom homes. We continue to build anywhere from 10 to 15 custom homes a year, including in the Heights. We built 2 houses on Morrison, directly across the street from that horrible, ugly thing, back in 2001. We built a home on Columbia, we built a home on Oxford. So we built in the Heights. It's just been a long time. I think the last time we built in the Heights was maybe 2003. So we built here, we built really all over the inner core of the city. Wherever our clients take us, wherever they buy a lot and want to design and build a custom home. That's a small part of our business, probably 20 to 35% of our business year in and year out. The majority of our business is these gated communities. We've done about 10 of them. They range in size from as small as 5 or 6 homes, like the one that we're finishing up by Rice University right now, that the homes over there are about $2 million apiece, and there's only 5 of them, to Cosseris across the way here that has 116 homes, and we're building our last ones in there right now, down to 3 homes for sale left in there. So that's kind of the range. Most of them are 15, 20, 25, 30 kind of units at a time, but they all have a Central Park, green space, gated security, high level of finish, both interior and exterior. It's about the architecture, it's about the luxury, it's about the lock and leave lifestyle, it's about low maintenance, Many of our clients, and then this will be true of the lofts, this is a second home or one of many homes. And part of the attraction to our developments is we take care of everything. Every single blade of grass, flower, irrigation head on the grounds in these cottages is maintained for you. You could be gone for 3 months for the summer or traveling, and everything will be maintained for you week in and week out, including changing out the seasonal color 4 times a year. Okay? There's nothing other than the maintenance that's required of your home itself, okay? But the grounds we take care of. The physical structure is still your responsibility like any single family home. So, started in '99, we built about 350 homes in that period of time. We have 3 different gated communities going at this time. Like I said, finishing up Costras, Winfield Gate, we're finishing up over there next to the River Oaks Bank building on the corner of San Felipe and Kirby. We've got our first 4 homeowners have moved in, and between now and the end of the year, the rest of the first 20 will move in. How did I do on the Rowan Wright story?
Did great.
What else?
I have a kind of a question, comment. I think that what y'all are doing is wonderful. I love the changes in it and all. But I've read some criticism online about the changes that y'all are making to what some people consider such a significant building in the Heights. Have you received those comments?
You know, I haven't.
What
I'm
are
not
you?
surprised by them, but I actually haven't had anybody call and tell us that they're displeased with us saving the building. But I certainly understand it. You know, it's interesting, as a business person, I'm excited about the opportunity to do an adaptive reuse and to not tear down the building. But on the other side, balancing it as a business person, the building's not very pretty.
It's not.
And to invest another $15 or $1 million into this project and end up with an ugly building, it's not a very good business decision. So we're looking at it, you know, from the standpoint of preserving the building, because it would be so wasteful to tear down such a great structure. It does have a great history. It was built by a phenomenal builder, so save it. You know, people often ask me, you live in a Rowan Wright home, and I tell them it's funny, I moved to Memorial 7 years ago, and my wife and I were looking for a place for a lot to build, and we found a home that, frankly, had great bones. And we're not a remodeler, it's not something we do every day, but we took it down to the bones and saved the house because it was a great structure. And we changed it a lot, but you know, there's no need to tear it down. It was a good structure, and that's how I feel about it. I'm certain that I can't please everyone. I've learned that a long time ago. And so if somebody's mad that we're taking off that old brick and putting on, I probably can't make them happen.
That's right.
It was for sale for years. They could have bought it.
Yeah, they could have already done it. That's right. So.
What plan starts at 699 on the houses?
The Plan A. It's 2237 square feet.
And we have 2 A's in the first?
There are 2 A's, 1 B, and a D. Yeah.
In the first.
Yeah. You have all 3 cottage plans.
Very nice sized rooms too, like on
They are.
Unit 301, 43-foot living room. That's really expensive.
Yeah.
In the loft.
301 is
Mhm.
fantastic.
Very nice.
And that one we have
I think
reserved
Jared
already?
wants to buy the lot.
I like these.
All right, I know y'all have other things,
Thank you very
sex
much.
offender lists to go over, and other important things, so if you have any questions, again, it's Andy Suman, give me a call, Don knows how to find me, just look up Rowan Wright, okay? Thank you for having us, we really appreciate it. Okay?
All righty. You don't have to stay for sex offenders if you don't want to.
Okay, well, I'll just introduce myself before I leave. Today's actually my first day on the job. I
Sorry
work
about
for
that, Lauren.
Andy. Yeah, I'm Lauren Murray, so I just graduated from college, just moved here to Texas, so.
Sorry about that,
No, it's
first day on the job,
Yeah,
so we're
first day.
excited to have you.
It's great.
And I told her, congrats for winning that College
Oh,
World
yeah.
Series. Vanderbilt graduated just a couple of weeks ago, so.
Series.
Yeah.
Yes, our first ever men's national title.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on topics here. We haven't talked about registered sex offenders in quite a while, so I thought we would, and we have a little discussion about registered sex offenders. We got to be careful about what we say about registered sex offenders and what are the responsibilities if you're on the listing side and you're on the buying side, because we have an ethical responsibility and we have a legal responsibility. And there's a fine line of how it works. And so, first of all, I wanted to start with general awareness. So we should be giving our clients, when we meet them, especially the buyer side, this general information and notice to a buyer, and we should kind of go over every paragraph. I happened to be at Revival on last Thursday, and there was a new Greenwood King agent sitting with her little young couple right by the register, and you have to wait a long time at Revival, I know that. And so I got to hear her go over her little presentation of the little notice, which was quite interesting to see. She looked about 20, and they looked about 20, but it was fine. It was very, very interesting, and how people just gloss over some of the stuff. A, I'm sure she doesn't understand it, first of all, and B, it's a lot of information for people to grasp in the first place. And we haven't gone over this whole form itself in a while, but it's one of these forms that I think you should take the time on one of the more substantive meetings with the buyer to go over kind of paragraph by paragraph. And some of it's just a simple explanation. Most of the areas that we're looking at have already been annexed by the City of Houston, so I don't anticipate any new annexations. But if we run across an area that's not in the incorporated area of the City of Houston, I'll mention it to you because those areas could be annexed by the City of Houston. That's a reasonable explanation for that paragraph. Appraisals are generally dictated by the lender, of course, so if you pay cash, you're not required to have an appraisal, although we often recommend that you receive one in the event that you do not use a mortgage. If we have a lender, the lender will choose the appraiser. The realtor will no longer be able to influence that appraiser, who they are, but we can certainly have a say into the values that should be considered. People measure all kinds of different ways. Staircases and second floors and vaulted ceilings are very hard to measure, and so you can't get fixated on 1 square foot one way or the other, but they're measuring air-conditioned space, not unair-conditioned space. Bob and I both have had an instance recently, where a large area that's enclosed, which is a room, is not considered air-conditioned space, and so the appraiser gave very little value to what is 1,000 square feet of an enclosure that certainly people use, and there are couches and rugs and TVs and ceiling fans, but that appraiser didn't give Bob's client any value, and it caused that sale not to go through, right?
We closed yesterday.
Oh, you did? Okay.
You came up with the extra money.
But this whole little form, I'm not going to go over it with you again today because that wasn't the purpose of our meeting. We're already going on. But I would kind of outline every paragraph and kind of what is the intention here. So when you get to the sex offender section, which we highlighted here, I would say there's a registry for sex offenders. You can go online and find where registered sex offenders are today. And you must realize the city is filled with registered sex offenders. Okay? And I'm not placing judgment or a value on that one way or the other. And no matter where you live today, there could be a sex offender there tomorrow. And no matter where they are today, they could leave tomorrow. Okay? So it's a floating migration of where the registered sex offenders are. There's no guarantee. You can't buy a house in the middle of Westview and assume that there's not going to be a registered sex offender. Because it could be the 17-year-old son who had sex with a 15-year-old girl or got caught. It could be your 15-year-old son who was peeing off the side of the road after the basketball game or whatever. I mean, you'd be surprised who are labeled registered sex offenders all the time. 33% of all registered sex offenders ended up marrying the person that they were accused of having sex with. Okay? And they're still labeled as a registered sex offender for a decade or however long that it might be. So there's plenty of parents that turn in the boy or the girl, and because they might be underage, and then literally people get married. Sometimes they last, sometimes they divorce. I don't really know one way or the other. But registered sex offenders are easily identifiable, and there's a website that we refer people for identification purposes. Generally on the website, you kind of need to know how it works. So I don't often go to the one that they reference in that deal. I tend to come to this one here, which is City Data, Houston, Texas, or whatever, because I kind of like this one better than the other one. So this is a website that we can send out to you later today, and it is kind of showing you where the registered sex offenders are. So I tend to look into the Heights area, so I glance over here into our little area and just come over here and click something, because let's focus on the Heights Boulevard. Well, this is Morrison. We can focus right here. I'm selling this house on Morrison, which is right here by my own personal house here, so I live right here. And click on this little section again. That will kind of define these areas. And so here's a registered sex offender. That's fine. Any of these are fine. That's fine. Just click on one here. So here's where I live at Balin and Morrison. And here, click on this little guy. If I click here, this tells me this guy, Michael Messer, is a low-risk guy. He lives on Redan. He's 6'1", he's a white guy, he's non-Hispanic. He was born in 1960. Click on this little section right here. He's a low-risk guy. This is his little photo. Here's what he's been doing over here. If he's got any other, keep going down. He's registered recently in March of 2014. He's obviously his location changed from where he was in 13 and 04. This can tell us what he did. He had sex with a male that was 15 years old in 2000. He had a 10-year sentence. He's out on parole. You can find out a lot of information about the individual. He lives right around the corner from me. All right, let's get out of this
That's
one.
also close to a school. How
It's
close
very-
is that?
Probably
What's the
100 feet
from the front door,
from the door.
straight back?
He's damn close.
That is
He's
really
damn
close. If you want to go straight over that first row.
Here's these little apartments right by Beauchamp where I live. There's usually tons of people here. Here's a white guy, 5'7". He was born in 57. Let's click on him, what we know more about this guy. Here's his picture. He's required to update his status quarterly. Keep going down. He registered last April 28th. He had sex with a 13-year-old. And he had a 5-year sentence. And so, yeah, I had pretty good. So, they're everywhere, okay? So let's get back out of this one. But if people are interested, certainly you should recommend. So literally you can see, and the one, there may be more than one in these certain areas. So you can take this little map and keep going down the map, and you can see, I'm telling you, they're literally everywhere. Takes the map a little while to catch up here. Keep going down and move over. This was, keep going down a little bit. This is perfect right here. So here's the mayor, lives right here. We happen the firm represented her. There are 4 sex offenders within 150 yards of where the mayor lives, okay? There's 4 on Emerson and 2 on Westmoreland, I think. If we click here, it'll update it again and bring you more even closer or whatever. But, so this is, there's a bunch of apartment complexes in that section. Wherever there's a bunch of apartment complexes, there's a registered sex offender. I mean, just, they're probably, if not, there will be one soon. So they're all over these little apartment complexes. You can get out of this and go to the Kirby office. Now, there are really a lot of them in these little apartment complexes. So when you cross over and you go to Westview and you figure out, well, where would the young nurses live or whatever, you're going to find some. Here's some on Banks, and there's one on Tangley, and there's one not far from the Kirby office. I think probably in what is that Robin Hood building or whatever, the high-rise thing there. But they're definitely all over the city, okay? And there's there's plenty in Memorial, and there's plenty in Camp Logan, in what are multi-million-dollar houses, which I'm sure these are the kids. Go back up here by the park. I just thought it was interesting to see how many there were. Plenty in Cottage Grove. Keep going. This is fine. Where are we? Yeah, keep going this way. I just thought it was interesting right here by the park there were a bunch. Which is kind of interesting to me. This is a relatively affluent area. I think there's one even right on West Cowan. Here's one right here by the park here. Here's Passwords. We're right over here in the Well, that's right there, bye, whatever. Okay, so this, I kind of like this little map, and we can send you this deal. Because if you go to the website of the one in the paper, let's go to that one, it gets a little more confusing. Let's go over here. Where we were. Oh no, this is good. You can come to this one and you can put in an address.
Or zip code works well.
Zip code works fine. Click down here at the bottom where we agree. And if we just put in Heights Boulevard, 1545 Heights Boulevard, which is here we are. And then zip 008. It's going to tell me that there's 56 registered sex offenders in my nearby area. And then it's going to give me all the, so there's 56 right here, tells me their name and where they are. Plenty over here by Bell Heights, don't think there's not, in the West 16th Street, West 15th Street, West 18th Street. Plenty of, here's another West 16th, here's some Yales, a lot of Yales, lots of Heights Boulevards. This deal is pretty up to date. And it kind of is intimidating to people, but the geography is pretty vast. I mean, I don't know that this guy on Airline is a major threat to us right here at 1545 Heights Boulevard, but they could be. But you can literally see plenty on Harvard. They're all over the place, okay? So what does that really mean? It definitely is going to scare off some people. I mean, it's going to scare off some people. If you're the listing agent, and you're at Bell Heights and you're in the sales trailer, and people ask you, are there any registered sex offenders, are there any sex offenders nearby? Well, you just say yes. I mean, plenty of sex offenders that aren't caught yet are registered. So the term is, are there registered sex offenders who are on the registry, who must notify the adjacent people and send out the little notices and abide by, you know, the procedures that they have to. And I think the biggest thing you've got to get out of here is that you cannot lie about the information. You can't, I mean, that we have an ethical responsibility not to intentionally mislead anyone in any manner, okay? You have no legal responsibility. If you know there's one across the street, you do not have to tell everyone that walks in the door that there's a sex offender 100 feet from here, okay? You have no responsibility to do that. We have an ethical responsibility to do so. And there's a fine line, because you can't tell the young couple with the 1-year-old who come into the trailer, I just need to let you know there's a sex offender across the street, and he molested a 1-year-old boy when he was 21 years old. And when the 55-year-old couple with no kids come in, you not tell them anything. And then their 1-year-old grandchild moves in with the, you know, comes to visit, and there's a problem, and you told one group of people and you didn't tell the other. That's wrong, and it is illegal, and we will get in trouble for that, okay? So, we represent a buyer, we represent a seller. What's our responsibility if we know that there's a sex offender over there? And treat people with honesty. If they ask you the question, you must if you know the answer, you must honestly answer the question. The general question, I would say, and I get asked the question all the time. I'm probably asked the question more than any of you, because there are registered sex offenders throughout the city. They are all over the city, okay? There are plenty in Heights. There are plenty in the Heights. And you can find the registry of where they are today. And like I mentioned, they're constantly a moving target, okay? Just because there's not one there tomorrow doesn't mean that there won't be one. I've got a 21-year-old son who he's just as stupid as some of the other people over here, okay? Really, okay? I mean, let's just be honest. It's possible that he could do something really stupid with a 15-year-old girl and be on the sex registry. I mean, I know that. Don't think Ginger's that stupid. She likes older men. But it's certainly possible. But I think just because there's not one, to me, doesn't mean that there won't be one next door or whatever. And that's what I usually try and get across. But we can't go and diminish the value of a certain listing or a certain neighborhood either by spreading this information. I remember with Margot, tried to buy a house with my agent, whatever, you know. She said, there's a sex offender, I can't buy it. And then she sent a whole email out about this, you know, registered sex offender in the 400 block of Harvard over here. If you intentionally, I mean, there are studies, I printed some out. Let's go tell everyone there's registered sex offenders in the 400 block of Harvard. Let's go buy all the houses in the 400 block of Harvard. Let's kick out the sex offenders in the 400 block of Harvard. Haven't we created an environment there that we intentionally reduce the value of the properties for some future benefit? Well, sure they did. Sure they did. That's just like steering. I mean, it's wrong to do that. So we can't adversely affect. We can't tell Row and Ride, we can't diminish their $47 million worth of listings by saying there's sex offenders on West 18th Street and West 16th and West 15th Street, because who knows if they're going to be here 2 doors down the road. But let's say we have a buyer. Now we're representing the buyer side, and we know there's a sex offender at 1015 Harvard. I mean, it's just here on the screen, it's on the videotape. We all know there's a sex offender now at 1015 Harvard. Do we have a responsibility to tell any buyer that we have and that we're showing in the 1000 block of Harvard that there's a registered sex offender? And the obligation is to be consistent. You'd have to check every day, make sure they're still there, because it could have been there 3 months ago and they're not there today or whatever. So I would think that we do not have an inherent responsibility to tell everyone where a sex offender is. But we have a responsibility to tell them that there's an accurate database that's available for them and they should look at it. Another whole study through the deal. You understand your client is way more likely to get bit by a dog than he was accosted by a sex offender, right? You understand your client is way more likely to get hit in the head by a falling tree than he is to be impacted by the sex offender. We don't identify every potential tree that's going to fall down. We don't identify every dog that's bitten someone. You know, so you've got to look at it in a similar context. There's no great legal way to go and promote where registered sex offenders are that don't adversely affect the buyer or the seller or the community. And there's no great way of knowing where the wife beaters are, or where the potential murderers are, or where the potential psychopaths are. They could be next door also. And the sex offender, while has been found guilty and is on this database, I don't know that we can have much more judgment of them than we can someone that shoplifted when they were 15 or did something else moderately stupid over there. So there's a fine line. I know there's a fine line, and we just never really talk about it too much. But no, I don't think we have to tell everyone that walks in the sales center that they're sex offenders. Yes, we have to give them the notice and let people know there's a registry for sex offenders. The grayest area, or the area I think we have the most difficulty in, is in the rental world, okay? You're not really going to have it too much in the sales world, honestly. You're going to get it all the time. I represent a tenant, and he's a sex offender. What's my responsibility to tell the listing agent side of that? Or you have a listing, and now there's a registered sex offender that comes and makes an application over there. And you must realize, registered sex offenders are not a protected class, okay? Can the owner reject an applicant because they're a registered sex offender? Yes. Absolutely they can. Absolutely they can. So, if we know someone to be a registered sex offender, and they're our client, and we're making application somewhere, do we have an obligation to tell the listing side? I think we do. I think we have an obligation to tell them. They're going to find out anyway. And if you knew, is it material when you're representing that person that they're a registered sex offender? I think almost in every instance it's somewhat material. I think it's material. And if you're the listing side, the same thing. You're going to be consistent. If you're going to do, most of my clients with garage apartments do a criminal background check on the people. It's easy enough to do. You pass the cost on to the applicant or whatever. You just have to be consistent. I represent the Ibetters. I've represented them for almost 15 years. They have a garage apartment in the back. They do a criminal background check on everyone. She's an attorney at Vincent Huffins. They've got 2 little girls in their backyard. They would never not do a criminal background check on an applicant for their garage apartment. As long as they've been consistent for 12 years, it works just fine. It's when one looks a little funny and we do it to Terry and we don't do it to Glenda that it gets people in trouble over there. So you just have to be consistent. Yes, Jim?
Okay, so I was just going to ask you about your feelings about a sense of fair play.
Okay.
Let me give you an example.
Okay.
A Boulevard Realtor is, dealing with a rental. He tells her that he's a sex offender. He doesn't tell her he's a sex offender. He goes, I can't be near a school, I can't be near a park, and I can't be near a church. So she figures it out. So what she tells him, and I'm just using this very literally, is okay, well, let me let Jim Ford handle you because he handles all the sex offenders.
I'm sure that's exactly what she said.
You want to rephrase that,
That's right.
There's no way. You understand, registered sex offenders rent apartments every day in Houston, Texas, and they rent them in the Heights area all the time. Just because someone's a registered sex offender doesn't mean that they can't rent an apartment.
No, I'm
Plenty of them right here that allow sex offenders, I'm sure. 600 block of Heights, right there, they're happy to take a sex offender.
What's your beef?
Well, I mean,
She
I don't
gave
want-
you that as a referral, or did she?
Yeah,
Or
she
did
just
now
said,
you're stuck
no,
with
she didn't give me it as a referral. She goes, I'm just gonna have Jim Ford handle it. And then she goes, here's his phone number, why don't you call him?
Oh, you mean, can we discriminate against even working with somebody because they're a sex offender?
Well, no, somebody made
Dusty
a
can say,
decision.
yes, I'm uncomfortable representing you as, as a tenant rep. I'm sure she can say that.
Right, okay.
Sure she can. If she is uncomfortable
It's not a
representing you
protected class.
as a registered
Right.
sex offender, sure she can. She can choose not to work with that individual. She didn't discriminate. Do what?
I don't want to go show, I don't want to be in apartments with you alone.
You don't have to.
If you're, no.
You don't
She might
Nor do
use
you have to
But if
work
I know
with
you're a
them.
registered sex offender, I
Nor
want to
do
be
you have
out
to
there
work
by
with them if you didn't
myself.
want.
So I couldn't just say, here's the phone number to Greenwood King, they're really good.
Sex offenders.
Well, you can say, here's the practicality of that same.
Yeah.
Here's a list of apartment complexes that meet your criteria. You're going to be better served by going there yourself and seeing if they have any availability. They don't really co-op with realtors anyway, and they don't put their information on the MLS, and that's not the expertise of the licensed real estate agents who are subscribers to the multiple listing service on HAR. You need to go find a little apartment complex. He can find where they allow them.
Yeah.
It's real easy to figure out where they allow them and let him go over there and apply.
Well, I know.
He wanted a $600 or $700 apartment. If he wants a $6,000 house in Westview, I'll take him.
Yeah. No, but he was asking me very specific questions. He goes, give me some advice and opinion. He goes, can we go to only the places where you think they're not going to run a criminal background check? And I'm sitting there and I'm saying,
How would you know?
Yeah,
How would we know?
Exactly.
That's what
I would pull up the registry.
saying.
The starting place would be to look up the registry and see where they allow it. We all, if you're in the business long enough, you're going to have clients that are registered sex offenders. I mean, you're going to have one at some point. You're either going to sell one-to-one, or you're going to lease one-to-one, or you're going to represent them yet.
I was gonna say, most of them probably won't even sign up to it. They'll just go, oh, I don't really like this one, knowing it's right across the street from the door of the school.
They're not a protected class, but they are people, and we're going to treat them ethically and honestly and fair also. But yeah, I would think Dusty would be uncomfortable. That area of town was rough to begin with.
Well, I know.
If he was a registered sex offender, she did not want to go at 8 p.m. to vacant areas for a $600 rental off of Cullen Street. She was not going to go do that.
Right.
Nor should she.
You don't want to pay a lot for rent, and that just complicates this thing.
Yeah,
even
it was
worse
a
than
rougher
it is.
area. I mean,
Yeah. There's no money.
Which brings up another thing that you're kind of working towards. Are we allowed to not take on a client? And
yeah.
We don't have
Sure
to,
you can. You don't have to
doesn't somebody doesn't fit your deal, you don't.
Please don't tell him you're not taking him because he's black.
Right.
Okay?
Oh.
Yeah.
But you can choose not to work with someone if you're uncomfortable with that or you're not the best fit for them. I don't know that it's black. I'm just saying, there are protected
They're not.
classes. Registered sex offenders not one of them. someone that has an unrealistic expectation. I will never be able to find what you want. The best place for you to find what you want is on Craigslist. Or, I mean, for some people, that's what they want. I can't find a $400 garage apartment. I can't find one. They don't list those on MLS.
$5.
It's not enough money. So, all right. Yes. Don't want to hang up there. But we just hadn't talked about sex offenders in a while. I just want to at least have the dialogue so we know that what dialogue we're going to have next. Any questions about
No more
sex
sex offender referrals, please.
You'd be
Call,
surprised.
get that on your business card.
Okay, let's get off that for a moment.
Well,
I know
got
it's
it
past
yet,
our time, but I want to cover
Those
this.
CNS,
I gave you some examples
behind your
because
business.
this is the prime time
Sex offender rental.
where this tax proration gets us, okay? We discussed early on, and we discussed from time to time, our tax proration deal, which we generally use in the instance where you're selling or buying new construction, and it once was a lot for $50,000, and now it's a $1.4 million penthouse or something, okay? You know there's a significant difference. Or if you're dealing with an estate, and Aunt Ruby's property taxes were $65, and now we're selling the lot for $400,000, and you're dealing with their title company, and they want to prorate the taxes based on the $14 a year. This is what this form is for, okay? And I still think this is a very, very good form. Later and later in the year, normal transactions, you would not necessarily have to use this form. But in almost every instance now, in the 3-county area that we're in, every one of these houses that you're selling has gone up at least by 10%, okay? The value of them has gone up by more than 10%, but the taxable value in almost every instance has gone up by 10%, okay? So, the typical title company over there in the month of June wants to use 2013's taxes, divide by 365, multiply by the number of days, yesterday happened to be 181 or whatever, and calculate a tax proration. And when you're selling any house of any significance, and there's a 10% difference, and they've gone from 550 to 610,000, or 700,000 to 770, that number starts getting to be pretty significant, okay? Nothing is more frustrating to me than about November 15th, I start getting 30 and 40 calls, and it's people who are trying to get $2,000 from a seller, from a closing that was in April or May. The seller's in Dubai now, or Seattle, or Oklahoma City, or on the golf course at Sun City in Georgetown. And you know how hard it is to go calculate? The calculation's easy. You're going to tell them, you signed a tax proration agreement, please mail my client a check for $1,750 before the taxes are due December 1. And we can help them write the letter, but it's frustrating. So, you know the value went up by more than 10%. Check the damn taxable value before you get to closing, okay? You see that the number went up. Any smart title company who doesn't want to be in the same conversation in November and December would adjust accordingly, okay? So I gave you the example. These are my 3 closings from this last week or whatever, okay? So, I gave you all the information that you would have. Let's start with something easy, 9th Street. 9th Street, the value went from $691 to $760. Sold this house for $1,379,000. Don't think there won't be a big adjustment the next time. I gave you the tax bill. You can calculate the proration, divide by 365, and multiply by the number of days. This one was the 177th day. That would have been the normal proration. We added all of my transactions 10% to last year's tax bill, okay? So I took last year's tax bill. I represent the seller of this deal, but I'm just telling them, you're going to owe this money in December. Let's give it to the buyer right now. We'll worry about if we're off by $50 or $100 in December. But we know the value went up by 10%, and I'm telling you the rate's going up also. So we took last year's tax bill, I multiplied times 1.1, added 10% to it, redid the calculation, and gave the buyer a fair and equitable number for a credit for the taxes at closing. This is the way it would typically be done if people are sane. okay? This is how it would be
Does
done.
Del Fullen do that on his
This
own?
is Del, automatically is gonna do it at any Boulevard Realty closing unless he calls me and discusses something odd otherwise.
Veritas is already
Okay.
using.
It's
you know,
very
things
common
that
today to do it. Asshole title companies that don't do it, let me talk to them. Because it's clear this is what's gonna happen. That was pretty easy. This is 938 Columbia. This is
Real quick
one-
on the title company.
Do what?
I've had this, and they want the agents to agree.
That's right, that's right.
So,
They do, because
the
they don't
title
want to
company might be
determine.
willing to.
When in doubt, they will default to the only certifiable number that they have. And I get that, but when I tell them, you know the value went up. It doesn't have to be certified for you to have knowledge that the taxes are going to be based on this new number. And you and I both know the tax rate is going up, not down.
But that's the title company. If the seller, and you represent the buyer,
Doesn't want to agree, don't go to closing. Because I'm going to talk to him one more time. And I'm going to tell him the same thing. You know you're going to owe my client this money on December 1.
Yeah, let's
We've
make it
agreed you're going to sign this tax proration agreement that you're going to agree to pay him December 1. Why don't we make the number more equitable right here on June 30th? Because you know you're not going to want to write in that check. And that we calculate exactly how much it's going to be because it's easy enough to calculate today. And when in doubt, we'll be conservative. They're using last year's rate. Between the $2 billion worth of bond elections and the fact that no one has any money, there's going to be rate increases so that the taxable rate will go up also. The value is going to go up. We don't even know what the rates are yet. So the rate goes up another 5 or 6 cents. It's also going to be more money that these sellers are going to owe the buyers. Columbia kicks in, selling for $1 million over here, do the same thing. Take last year's tax bill, multiply times 1.1, give my guy credit. You can see exactly what the credit was over here. Karen's clients didn't have any issue with it when we explained it to them. Not too big a complication on a normal 10% deal. It's not a whole lot of money if you're selling something for $250,000, but it's money. It starts to be a lot of money. Fountain View closed yesterday. It was not owner occupied. The value of the property you can see went from $690. I'm sorry, that was 528 to whatever.
700,
Yeah, remember my clients don't have homestead exemption. They never live there. So the taxable value is going from 528 to 700. $171,000 difference in taxable value. Multiplied times $2.56 or whatever. I mean, it's a lot of money. It's $3,000 and $4,000 a year, prorated by the number of days, is about $2,200 extra. So we know there's no exemption. We know the value. We calculated the new value. Couldn't use last year's tax bill because it doesn't work. Because remember, this one's not capped by 10%. So we wouldn't want to take last year's and multiply by 10%. That doesn't do me any good. Got to use the real number over here and calculate by estimated tax rate, $2.55, something, just pick a number over here, and then explain it to all the parties over there, and we gave the buyer an appropriate number. These are my closings. I represent the seller, and I'm still giving them what is the fair and equitable number, okay? You gotta pay attention to this till they all get certified. It's not gonna be certified until October or whatever. So in this period of June, July, August, September, you know the value, it's out. The grayest area is if they're protesting, but if they're protesting, every value went up by 10%, okay? Unless there's a fire there or something. So we still could use the 1.1% rule. Is a common sense approach to dealing. Like say, if they had over 65 and they died last year, it's an estate or it's non-owner occupied, then we need to use a more reasonable number because your clients are going to come back to you and say, I just got a bill for $11,000 and I got $2,000 credited to me on July 1. Go help me get this $5,000 from the seller. They're going to look to you. You're the professional. You know. I got a meeting here at 1 o'clock. The agent did everything right except the buyer perceived that the agent didn't, okay? They perceive, and the courts are consistently saying, you are the professional. You are supposed to know this. And I mean, that's my role to train you and teach you whatever. Yes, we are the professional. We should know if our clients are not getting a proper proration of their taxes. We are not ethically or legally responsible for writing them a check, but you don't, I mean, I have had to write plenty of checks to pay people for their taxes. Because what happens is, you start fighting about it with the seller in December. Well, they come due, they may want them paid in December, or they're not technically past due till January 31st. But then the penalties start kicking in, so I'm usually forced to go pay it, and then help the person go try and recover the money from the other side, because the penalties can be thousands of dollars also, and who's gonna pay for the penalties?
But,
So, yeah.
I mean, if you explain to them that the seller is being unreasonable, won't you?
Don't go to closing until it's worked out. If you went to a walkthrough and they removed all the carpet up the staircase, you wouldn't go to closing until you resolve that issue, right? You thought it was gonna be carpet there, now there's no carpet there. It's the same thing. You don't have to go to closing. You can negotiate your way through there. There's common sense. And people want their money, so they're not gonna not close. If they think there's some reason that they're not gonna owe this money in December, it's A plus B equals C. They're going to owe the money. They agreed in the contract to the tax proration agreement. They were gonna go to closing and sign the tax proration agreement. Let's just prorate now on what we know to be common sense.
Well, especially this time of year where it's
This time of
already
the year, it's
approaching. I mean,
there. They had the chance to protest it. So maybe if they're at a protest, I mean, but in years past, when it went up 2%, they were going to protest or something. No one is going to win one of these protests on the 10% deal. They're not going to win. It doesn't matter. They're wasting their time. The values went up by more than 10%. So did I explain that very well? On how, when in doubt, take last year's tax bill, multiply times 1.1, that got you a 10% increase, and prorate on that number. Yes, Jim?
Okay, so really, you're also watching our back when we bring you the deal.
I'm checking these tax prorations when you bring me the deal, yes. I'm having Brandon pull up the taxes right quick so I can see what it is. If you send your HUD to me to review, those of you that are new or are doing that, then I'm checking it already. Yes. But it catches us. I mean, this time of year, it's $600,000, $700,000, $800,000. It gets to be a big number.
Yeah, but when it's $250, I mean.
Still a big deal to them.
It's a big deal to the, yeah.
They're only buying.
But the seller's gonna say, at title, or at closing, we're signing, you know, the form that we agree to this, whatever. That's what, I mean, that's what they're gonna say.
Let me talk to them. It's what I get paid to do. I'll talk to them.
Okay.
Reasonable is reasonable. You know you owe the money. Why are you wanting to wait to pay the money in December when it's Christmas time and hard to find people, and it's not easy to go collect money from people at Christmas time or the first of the year? So, okay, questions about that? Yes?
What if you, I mean, if you're in that situation and you represent the buyer and you explain to the buyer that I don't think you're, and the seller will not use.
The new number.
Well, the new number's not out yet. Or this happened a couple months. This
Well,
happened a couple months ago. The new number
Ideally, if
wasn't
we had
out.
this signed, we could have
Okay.
a fight early on.
Right, but, you know, the seller's like, well, we don't know what it's gonna be, we're not gonna do anything, he'll pay the money later, and you go to the buyer, and you say, look, here's our situation, I think, you know, it's crap, they should, you know, go with a different number, and your seller or your buyer is, fine, I don't care, I'll get the money later, don't worry about it.
Buyer understands that proration was based on last year's number. It's anticipated that there'll be an increase, and is willing to go to closing using the old number. Haven't signed it.
I gotta say that as a.
What's the other form that you
You
have?
can put it on the buyer's walkthrough. You can put it in a number of places. But yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just not going to work out. I'm saying common sense works 90% of the time.
I just have to.
The biggest issue where that comes into play is, yeah, I'm selling it was a lot for $100,000. Now we're selling $879,000. But January, there is no value yet, so we don't really have to use $879,000 because January 1 it was just a frame up there. So we can get, you can go online. I can see from the permit what inspections they had. If they've had a foundation inspection, then they had a foundation. If they've had an electrical rough bin inspection, they are rough bin. If there's inspection, I mean, I can tell how far their new construction is online at the City of Houston, which would determine if it's 40, 50%. That's the same argument I'm going to make at HCAD. If they come out with a value of $879, I'm going to go over there and say, look, I didn't even have a frame inspection yet. There was no frame there. There was only a slab there. It was poured this day, and you can win those arguments fine. I think it's pretty easy to explain. Okay, we took a little longer than I thought. Any question about that tax proration or what we're talking about there? Any other notices? I'm out, but I'm available. Detroitpia, July 15th. Our White Linen Night Party will be in conjunction with Bell Heights. We'll be trying to perfect this relatively soon. There's room for all of us over there. It's going to be a fun event or whatever. We'll go in with them. We'll get some form of air conditioning somewhere.
Two chances for marketing yourself, self-promotions. Number one, the invite for Detroitpia, we're working on it. If you would like to have your picture put on it and send it out, Aaron and his merry band can help you with that. Also, there is the first hurricane of the year, or the tropical storm is over by Florida, expected to be named a hurricane today and then go up the East Coast. We have a hurricane preparedness flyer that is available. You can also put your picture on that, send it out to your clients. And in celebration of the 4th of July, Eric, who's not here today, and I have created Life is Short, Eat Dessert First. We have red, white, and blue yogurt and toppings from Menchie's that I'm going to set out for y'all to help yourself.
Very good. All right.
I'm excited.
Thank you all very much.
Are you really?
Yeah.